For this video, we are working with the premise that consciousness does not end once the body dies. And we base this concept off of many research that has been done in so-called near-death experiences. People who have clinically died, whose heart has stopped, whose brain activity has also ceased to function, and still they were able to bring the person back. But not only that, the person in question claimed that they experienced all kinds of different realities during that time. So that is just a brief concept that I wanted to share before we talk about the rest of the stuff for this video. There have been many interesting books about near-death experiences that are worth reading if you haven't looked into them. You might be wondering, okay, can you give me some titles for books? Well, right now I can't actually. Might sound a bit stupid on my part, I know, but it's like over the years, I have read certain books. I haven't really memorized the titles. I do have one book on my desk, but it's completely in Dutch, in my native language. I don't know for sure if this person has translated their book into English, but he was a cardiologist. And if I were to translate the title directly, it would say Infinite Consciousness or Endless, Boundless Consciousness, basically. That's the title of his book. I don't know if it has been translated, so it would be one of those books, at least, that is worth studying, because the author is a cardiologist and he has a medical degree and approaches this subject as much as possible from a scientific standpoint, from what they know concerning the human body and consciousness so far. And he too came to the conclusion that we are working with the wrong idea here, based on all the evidence that is starting to show up more and more globally, that consciousness clearly doesn't at least seem to end entirely when the person dies. So that made me think about something that I wanted to make the subject of this video, which is that there is a saying in spiritual teachings that death is not the solution or the end of potential suffering. So a person that's very suicidal and ends up taking their life, they hope that dying will make it end. But if consciousness keeps going on, then we have to ask ourselves the question, what role the quality of our consciousness actually plays beyond the grave. Because if we work from this premise, it can very easily show that death would not be the solution, because the negative feelings and the negative thought patterns and imaginings in the mind can keep going on, which would then, in my opinion, create that effect that we can call hell. For example, when people talk about going to hell after death, to me that means that the consciousness of the person in question is in such a negative state that it creates for itself a hellish realm. Whereas if you're very optimistically focused throughout your life and then die because of yourself being trained in that way, you would experience what you could call a heavenly realm, a heavenly state of being. Now, these things are under our control. That's the most important part in the end. Now, in some religions and stuff, they like to say that, well, you either go to hell or to heaven, but they're not really working with the premise that since consciousness goes on after death, then you have a lot of it under your own control, and it depends on how you use your own consciousness and the faculties of the mind, or of consciousness itself. So there are three very important faculties, I'd say, that we want to analyze now that we're here, especially now that we're here, before we die, and which are imagination, thinking, and feeling, or the emotional states we experience. We want to experience and experiment with these faculties for ourselves deliberately. So we want to actually become good at using our imagination to build visions in our minds. We also want to be good at thinking optimistically about stuff concerning ourselves and existence. And therefore we want to learn to feel good as much as we can about everything that we face, no matter what it is. Now, I think one trick that helps with this, that I also need to keep developing, and that you may have developed better than me, or maybe you haven't even started, but it's the ability to see the good in everything that you encounter. Because it's true, there's a lot of chaos in this world, a lot of darkness, a lot of evil, a lot of suffering. And I've talked about it throughout many videos now myself, that this suffering is really unbearable at times for humanity at large, but also individuals suffer very greatly in private. But then the question remains, if we have this ability to see the good in everything, could that help us alleviate the suffering? And I think it can. And it doesn't take away the suffering, it doesn't take away the darkness necessarily. We are still aware of all the evil that happens and all the chaos, wars, and all the sad things, the tragedies of life and that people do to each other. But if we look for the good in everything, it means that we are training our consciousness to at least operate optimistically as much as possible. But not only that, if we become good at it, in spite of negative situations, we discover that we wield an enormous power to control our own consciousness, and that is the very part and knowledge that will help you navigate the astral realm, as they call it, which is another dimension of existence that you experience after physical death, after you no longer have a physical body. That's what you experience. And it's important to know that dreams that you have at night are taking place in the astral realm. Basically, it's true, I'm claiming there that it is a aspect of the afterlife, the so-called after-death state, etc. So it makes it very interesting also to not dismiss your dreams as just nonsense or something that isn't important. Of course, dreams can be extremely bizarre. And usually they are that way because we are in that moment not controlling our own imagination specifically. Because dreams are a manifestation of our imaginative faculty. And if you were aware in your dreams, you can then control and direct it through the power of imagination. So if you were in a nightmare, you could instantly end the nightmare and turn it into something awesome. And if it's something heavenly and you are aware of it, you can then explore that awesome place, for example, and you realize, whoa, I clearly have evidence here that I am aware of a totally different world, even though my body apparently is asleep on bed, but here I am experiencing a different reality with a totally different body. Again, don't dismiss that. If you had the experience like I have multiple times now, and I know many people around the world also have experienced this, it seems to clearly show you evidence, at least on a personal level, that you are more than just a physical creature called a human being. And this all ties back into this power of consciousness being the source, the ultimate foundation from which everything else arises that we experience. Whereas the physical world is a realm, a dimension where we experience matter, but the problem is if we then say that this physical world is the very cause of consciousness, for example, where they say the brain causes consciousness, so when the brain ceases to function, consciousness ends. So basically if you die, it's all over, there's going to be nothing, the show is over. It's total darkness, nothingness very much. That's the premise where a lot of people operate from, but slowly but surely there, as I said at the beginning of the video, there seems to be more and more information and evidence coming out to the contrary, that this is not going to be the case for us. So if we just work with this premise, and especially if you already have had experiences of going beyond the body itself with your consciousness, realizing there's way more, that it becomes more and more important for us to work on ourselves and in developing this power of our own consciousness so that we can make use of it once we leave this world behind. Because I think there's a real risk if we do not develop this, that when you die, it might end up being similar to going to sleep at night and entering a dream. And then if you have zero experience or knowledge about your true power, the true power of imagination, you can imagine whatever you want, etc., that you might sort of bow down to everything that you experience by then after death and go along with it, again, unconsciously, because that's also what happens when we're dreaming at night. However, I'm also aware that in many near-death experiences there's spoken about that people have zero knowledge about spiritual matters or anything of this kind. They die and then they became aware of this different world and they were completely aware and in their power. So they weren't necessarily unconsciously going along with everything. They were as sharp as they are when awake, as you and I are now when we're awake. But the difference there is that they had no knowledge necessarily of their own power. So what then happens, based on these accounts, is that they go along with what other entities supposedly tell them they should do. And this, I think, is a real risk factor. Because good or bad intentions of supposed other entities, it can be compared to human beings. There can be people come into your life with good or bad intentions. They may seem like nice people, but they secretly want to do you harm or something like that. I think it's very naive to assume that when you die, that every entity you might come across is going to be all loving or positive and have the best interest in mind for you. So therefore, I feel that there's a risk there. It's going to be the same as with human beings, physically speaking, is that if you're not aware of your own power and abilities, well, then other people can really mess with you. For example, physically speaking, they can mess with you in all kinds of ways. Now, in the astral world, other entities can clearly do the same, because it's no different than here. There's a difference, of course. You have your full power in the astral world already, which, if you have no experience on it, these words sound bizarre perhaps, but trust me on that. I've already experienced it personally. Imagination in that realm instantly becomes reality for you. So whatever you imagine becomes your reality, becomes the very thing you experience. And there's no delay in it either. You don't have to sweat, work, and be like, oh, I hope I can achieve this dream. No, when you're in the astral world, you dream of having a mansion and instantly it manifests around you and you can explore that mansion and just enjoy it. And then you're like, okay, well, let me now imagine a beach, or then it manifests. So, okay, well, let me actually use my imagination to look back on the journey I had, physically speaking. And then you see your life flash by and you can analyze it like a third person, like an outsider would. I've had that experience myself in my own way, where I went back into the past and I could re-experience a birthday, for example. But the fascinating thing is I could see myself. So it was like I was an outsider looking at my physical, incarnation, like this physical persona of mine that I am right now, physically speaking. And I could just look at it, at who I was, physically speaking. I was like, this is kind of wild. And then I collapsed the scene and I did something else. So I mean, this is the kind of stuff you have to become aware of, that you wield this ability, this power. So then, after death, you can use it. You can just use it wisely and use it to your own benefit. And if other entities come along and tell you should do this or that, well, if you know your own power, you could at least give a counter argument to that if you want, instead of going mindly and blindly along with everything that they suggest you should do, because that really leads back into the whole idea of also bowing down to authority, physically speaking. For example, if you're very used to that, then when you die, well, it's no strange thing for me to consider that you bow down to supposed other entities as well. Like, they have to tell you what to do or what's possible for you, etc. But when you discover your own power for yourself, you realize, wait, nobody can really tell you what you can or cannot do. And that is when you take power into your own hands. And death then won't be entered into an unconscious state of total ignorance. We will always be ignorant of certain things. I know I am. I don't have all the answers, but we can at least try to know more and understand more about our true nature without dismissing it right away as nonsense, because the current scientific world or medical world doesn't seem to always accept the claims that I make. They might say, oh, this is just his own hallucinations or something. They want to go through that direction, right? But it's completely dismissing the possibility. Wait, but what if this is all true? What if there's multiple planes of existence through which our conscience can move, etc.? Well, then we better know about it, and we don't enter it with a closed mind, etc. So that's what I wanted to share with you today through this video, is the 3 aspects of consciousness that we really want to work with day in and out before we even die. Is the imagination, our ability to think, and our ability to feel. So we want to use these 3 powers as optimistically as we can, no matter the situation we face. And this is not always easy, I know. It might take effort depending on what you are going through. But if you can develop this power, you will actually be better off in the long run. And death also will at least offer you a much more glorious experience than if you were very pessimistically focused and then die in total pessimism, anger, sadness, or whatever. I mean, that's just my conclusion for now. I don't, of course, know 100% for a fact that this is how it all works, but at least it makes the most sense to me currently where I'm at in my own level of understanding. So whatever you face, and a very simple example on how to do this is I would write down a situation I face, and then I'm like, okay, let me now focus on what is good about this situation I'm facing. Initially, I might feel uncomfortable or bad or maybe frustrated with the situation as they arise, but then I realize, okay, I can also sit down and write the situation out for myself and then really think, what is good about it? And then you're using your thinking faculty in an optimistic manner. That's the idea here. So if you keep experimenting with this for yourself in your own ways, you should feel a huge improvement start to develop in your overall state of mind and your overall state of being throughout your days. So I hope it gives you something to, think about and work with for yourself. And well, with that being said, I guess I gotta let you go now. Well, you're not really here with me, but you hear my voice through cyberspace, and that's about it. So I hope you have a great day, and never forget that we are the dreamers.